So as I mentioned, obviously I've been working in Saudi for some time. And when I first started working at the British Embassy and I was working in the defence field, I was often going into organisations where I was the very first woman to have gone in with with sort of delegations from the embassy. And interestingly, I was never made to feel as if I was the first woman that had been through. But it felt very strange because I'd obviously been working elsewhere and before coming to Saudi, where we are everywhere. So it took a little bit of time to sort of get used to it. But I was never made to feel that I was unusual to be there. Back then also facilities weren't always great in government offices for women when you're whizzing around or you're taking companies in. But looking at the change over the last 4 or 5 years, and we're no longer an enigma. There are so many Saudi women working in business, and when they were first started joining a lot of companies, they were in segregated offices because that's the way everybody assumed it should be. But it's very different now. There are Saudi women in all organisations. I now find, I've always found that it's a very safe place to be, and I've always found it very easy to do business. But I think it's also knowing the landscape you're in and being mindful of the way that a country works slightly differently to everywhere else. So sometimes I used to find when I was going in with a lot of male colleagues into a meeting, I would often be the focal point, but a lot of it would be not old-fashioned, but probably a little bit as we were a few years ago. The first conversations would be very much about me, family. That wasn't necessarily to take away the fact that I was there for business, but it was honouring me as a woman. Now when we're out and about, there are many Western women that come in. There are a lot of Saudi women in business, in government, in senior positions. So it's no longer, you're no longer the only one sticking out. And also a couple of years ago, in 2019, a lot of the rules were relaxed for when they automatically were looking at the tourist visa coming into fruition. Up until 2019, whenever I was leaving a compound or my house, I'd have to wear a black abaya, which you might have seen, for going into business, going into shops. The Crown Prince said that I think it was the end of 2019, that international women no longer needed to wear it. So actually, I felt that quite empowering. Obviously, being very mindful, wearing similar things as you would normally in business going into companies. And I don't really see there is a very big difference. They're very honourable of women. They are, I think they're pleased that we're part of the landscape now, I think. And I would imagine it's as a lot of Saudi organisations are used to that with their travelling. I mean, I've noticed, and now in the last couple of years, there are more Saudi women within the forces themselves, which is a great change and starting, and that will also evolve. So I think that it is a safe place to work. I drive in Saudi as well. The roads are not necessarily the the best, but I think it's getting out of that mindset to think it's any different to any other city that you're working in, because the rules are very different now, and the challenges are less than they used to be. So I think that any colleagues that are coming out, whether they're coming for visits or coming to stay, if they're coming to stay in hotels, it's now very welcoming for women. A few years ago, when I first had friends and colleagues coming out for business, they'd be staying in hotels and you weren't able to use gyms and things like that. But that has all now changed. So I think it's wonderful to see that actually it has changed, and to see more international women travelling now or working here as in business development and lots of different roles.
Yeah.
I think just as Saudi's transformed, everybody's view of Saudi's got to transform. I've worked in Saudi since 2011, I suppose, both with the Ministry of Defence and otherwise. And the concept that it's dangerous, I think, there's this sort of concept that women are oppressed and it's dangerous and, not allowed to do anything. It's just so not true. I have never, ever been discriminated. I've been treated with nothing but absolute kindness and respect for whatever role I've been in. Do I wear the abaya? Yes. Do I like wearing it? Yes. Have I been asked to wear it as a coat rather than as fully done up to try and encourage others to still be respectful, but to still, wear Western dress, if you like, underneath. But, as Lizzie said, I've never found anything other than it being a very, very pleasant, nice place to work. And as for safety, there's no issue with safety. I mean, I walk a lot, and I tend to walk around the streets of Riyadh, which people sort of say to me, why do you do that? Well, why wouldn't I? I'm in the abaya, don't get me wrong. But I've never known anything other than politeness. And I really think it's time that the women issue, and now everybody can drive and all the rest of it, it's just as important the men know how to behave, by the way. There's just so many cultural norms that the men really ought to respect slightly more from Western into Saudi, just as much as it's not a women thing anymore, in my view.